Now, what do you call a cat in Hindi? A cat is called Billy in Hindi, right? Now, in Spanish, it is called gata. In Mandarin, or as you call it, Chinese, you call it Mao. So here, different people in different areas are calling the same cat by different names, right? So, and if you don't know the language, you have no idea what they're talking about, right? So people thought maybe we should have a universal naming process. And they came up with binominal nomenclature. This was called binomial nomenclature before. Now it is called binominal nomenclature. This was proposed by the scientist Carlos Linnaeus. And the process of giving each organism a scientific name is called binomial nomenclature. The process of naming, giving a name, but scientifically. So there are some rules applied to it. What are they? Let's see. Remember, this was proposed by Carlos Linnaeus. And what are the rules? They have to follow according to International Code of Zoological Nomenclature. ICZN. International Code of Zoological Nomenclature. They have to follow these rules. So now let's see what is this binominal nomenclature. So every organism out there, all the organisms are named, right? So first of all, we have to come with a language. So they decided to go with the dead language, Latin. That means all the names of the organisms are Latinized or derived from Latin, not English. They are Latinized. And each name consists of 2 words. This we already know, right? The first one is called the genus, and the second is called the species. Right? So, the genus is capitalized. The first letter. First letter is the capital, and for this, it's a small letter. Now the font is, these are italicized. This is just the font, people. And they are derived from Latin because it's a dead language, and it consists of 2 words. Now the genus, this is usually the noun. The genus is usually the noun. Now what is the species? The species, as they call in your textbook, it is written as epithet. It means it is describing the noun. This is not an English class, but let's go with it. Epithet means it is an adjective which describes the noun. That means the species, the word species, describes the genus, which is a noun. So each organism consists of 2 words. Binomen, right? Bi means 2. Binomen means it consists of 2 words, genus and species. Genus starts off with a capital letter, and the species, remember, do not capitalize. It always starts off with a small letter. They are in italics. Italics is just a font. Now, the genus is the noun form of the organism that you're describing, and epithet is the adjective. That means it actually describes the noun. So let's take an example here. What is it? Let's take the example from the book. It is Felis Leo. The first letter is capitalized, the second isn't. It is a small letter. Felis Leo means lion, right? Roars. Okay. So, who coined this one? Remember the guy, Carlos Linnaeus? Yeah, don't forget him. He plays a very important role in nomenclature. So this guy first described lion as Felis Leo. Felis is the genus name and the Leo is the species. And because this is the guy who described it, we can write it as Felis Leo Linnaeus or Felis Leo Lin or Felis Leo L. All of these are different ways of writing the name of lion, the Lion King. Okay, but this was back in the day, right? In 1758, described it. But new and improved ways of characterizing the organism has come into existence. We have found that the hyoid bone in this is ossified, and so these animals can roar. So then came another scientist who said, no, we are not going to put lion in Felis genera, we're going to move it. So then he renamed it to Panthera leo. See here, before it was Felis, but now it is Panthera leo. Why? Because they grouped all the organisms that can roar because of the ossified hyoid bone in the larynx. So it is termed as Panthera leo. So when you change the name of the animal from before, because this guy named it as Felis leo, right? But now it is Panthera leo. So then what you do is you put the name of the guy and the date or the year when it was named in bracket or in parenthesis. This means that in 1758, this guy Linnaeus actually put the Panthera, the genus, into a different one, which is a Felis. Okay. So far we have learned that naming the organism scientifically consists of two words, the genus and species. Genus and species. And the genus starts off with a capital letter, the species starts off with a small letter. This is an important rule, and they all have to follow ICGN rules, and they are all Latinized. That means they are derived from Latin. And the first one is the noun, and the second one is the epithet, which is an adjective that describes the noun. And for an example, we have taken lion, which is coined by Linnaeus. He called it Felis leo. And along came another scientist who said, no, we are going to place it into a different genera, and he called it Panthera. So now it is called Panthera leo. So let's look at something here. See, before it was under they're all cats, small cats and big cats. But it is not in this genera anymore, and it has its own genera called Panthera. This was replaced by Lawrence Oken. This is the name of the scientist, which isn't important, but Then comes next is, so now that you have understood, and these are the different ways of writing the name. Yeah, all of them are correct, but stick to one. Next comes binominal nomenclature. We have discussed about that. Then comes trinomial nomenclature. Now, this is an extension of binomial nomenclature. Tri as the name. Trinomial nomenclature. Okay. Tri as the name indicates, it means three. That means it has to have three words, right? Before we know that, there is genus, species. Now there is a third word, that is a subspecies. It is called a trinomial nomenclature. It is an extension of the binomial nomenclature, which consists of a subspecies. For example, if we take the cat, we have Felis, Catus, Domesticus. That means it has three words. Why do we have the third one? I mean, we've already learned that there are only 7 obligate categories, right? We end with the species. But sometimes what happens is there are very small variations in the species, which are slightly different from the species. So we call them as subspecies. And given time, if we give it a few million years, this species or this subspecies will end up into a different species, a new one. That's why we say evolution, which is dynamic. But we are digressing here. The binomial nomenclature, extension of the binomial nomenclature is the trinomial nomenclature, because we are describing the subspecies, one level below the species, because it is slightly different from the species. There are very few variations. These can interbreed with the other subspecies. If there are 3 subspecies, they can still interbreed and give rise to new organisms or new offsprings. So that is the trinomial nomenclature. And for man, the example is Homo sapien. This is the genus, species, subspecies. But for humans, there's only one subspecies. We can all interbreed, right? Anyway. So the other thing that we need to understand when it comes to nomenclature is tautonymy. Now, what does that mean? That means this is a process of naming the organism where the genus and the species are the same. For example, axis. The genus and the species are the same. Okay, this is deer or spotted deer. Or another example is naja. This is cobra. The first letter is capitalized. The second letter is the small letter. Okay, so remember 3 things. Binomial nomenclature consists of 2 words. Binomen, right? Binomial nomenclature has 2 words, genus and species. First letter is capitalized. Second one is small letter, and the genus is the noun form of this organism, and the species is the epithet or the adjective that describes the noun. For example, the lion is called Felis leo, long time ago. Linnaeus was the guy who coined it, and the way we write it is Felis leo Linnaeus, Felis leo Lin, or Felis leo L. Okay? But over the time, people recognize that there is a difference between the small cats and the big cats because of the hyoid bone in the larynx, so that these animals can roar. So they placed the lion into a different genera, that is Panthera leo. It is not called Felis leo anymore. It is called Panthera leo. But because Linnaeus was the guy who actually named it as Felis leo, we put his name in the brackets with the year that he actually coined it. Okay. And the extension of the binomial nomenclature is a trinomial nomenclature, because there are very few variations that we can actually see in the species. So we name them subspecies. In the previous class, we have seen Corvus splendens, which is a native of India and Pakistan, has a subspecies in Myanmar, which is called Corvus splendens insolens. Right? Remember that? Okay. So when it comes to cat, we call it Felis catus domesticus. This is the subspecies. And if you take human being as an example, it is Homo sapiens sapien. This is the subspecies. We don't have a subspecies now, but a long time ago in the Cro-Magnon man, there was another species. But now we have only one. That is trinomial nomenclature. Trinomen means 3, binomen means 1. Tautonymy means it's the process of naming the organism with the same genus and the species. Example is Axis, and Naja. With this, we come to the end of the nomenclature, the binomial nomenclature and the trinominal nomenclature. Now comes species. What do we know about species? We've been talking about taxonomy for a while now, right? Species is at the end of the line, right? This is the basic unit of classification. So at basic level, you know how we always break down the macromolecules into all the subparticles. We come all the way back to positrons and stuff. We take an individual and we think, okay, so what is the basic level? We come to the cell at the cellular level. In the same way, if we take the classification, the basic unit is the species. We always come all the way back to species. This is the basic unit of classification, the smallest level of classification. Okay. So let's see how the scientists described or what their views are about the species. Now, first guy is John Ray. This is the first scientist. Now, this guy came up with a book called Historia Generalis Plantarum. This is the book he wrote. Okay. Now, what did he say? He said, species, we are talking about species. There are 4 different authors or 4 different scientists who gave their own views of species, and that is what we are going to learn in this topic. So first of all, we take John Ray. He wrote in his book Historia Generalis Plantarum, he said, species, what is species according to him? He said they are morphologically similar individuals. So that means they have a common ancestor. Okay, so the first guy who came up with the species concept is John Ray. In his book Historia Generalis Plantarum, is that according to him, species means these are morphologically similar individuals. What does that mean? These guys have a morphologically similar characteristics because they have come from a common ancestor. That is according to John Ray. Then came our guy Carlos Linnaeus, right? So according to him, we already know, right? He says species is the basic unit of classification. Let's say another color. Basic unit of classification. And what did he write? He wrote Systema Naturae. This is the book he wrote. So according to him, species is a basic unit of classification. But according to John Ray, they are morphologically similar individuals. Now there is another guy, Buffon, and this is the guy we're gonna we'll actually learn about. Not the guy per se, but what he said about the species. Now, according to him, when the concept of evolution of species, according to him, the evolution of species is the foundation for the concept of evolution, biological evolution. Now, this is what we understand, because before we learned, right, the species has a subspecies because of the variations in them, right? These species have subspecies because of variations, and over time they change into a different species. Now, what is this process? We call this process evolution, right? So according to him, if we take the evolution of space or evolution of species, it lays a foundation to the concept of evolution in general, in as a biological concept of evolution. Because at the basic level, this is where the evolution is happening. On a broader scale, we call it evolution. This is by Buffon. And the book he wrote was Natural History. Okay. These are the three guys: John Ray, Carlos Linnaeus, and Buffon. The third guy we all know and like, well, maybe not like, but we all know is Charles Darwin. Now, what did he write, people? This you should know, right? What did he write? He wrote Origin of Species. When Buffon came up with his idea of evolution, Charles Darwin, along with, when he learned about Malta's population and ecology and stuff, with a lot of information out there, he came up with Origin of Species. Although this was not the first idea that came out, there was another scientist also who came up with the same thing. But that is digressing. So we're gonna stick to the points here. So he came up with Origin of Species, and the evolution of species became very popular because of Buffon. So these are the four scientists that you need to remember. Each had their own concept of species. John Ray said that species is a group of individuals having the same ancestry with morphological similar characteristic features. Then Carlos Linnaeus said the basic unit of classification is species, and he wrote the book Systema Naturae. Then came Buffon. He wrote in his Natural History, he said that the evolution of species is what paves the way for evolution, biological evolution in general. Then Charles Darwin came. We all know about Charles Darwin, right? We don't have to go in detail. He wrote Origin of Species and how evolution takes place with the survival of the fittest and stuff. That is about species. Remember about species, people, because this is a 4-mark question. It is important. Not just, don't study for the sake of exams anyway. Study because you want to learn about them. Okay, so there are 4 things that we need to learn about species from Buffon. There are 4 points. This was proposed by who? By Buffon. So what did he say? Let's say he said there are 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. When it comes to describing a species. The first one he said is a breeding unit. That means these individuals are geographically segregated into a population. These guys interbreed between themselves and produce fertile offsprings. So species is a breeding unit, and this only breeds inside the species. Interspecies breeding doesn't happen. So the smallest unit is the species, and this is the breeding unit. The first point that he said was reproductive unit or breeding unit. They are reproductively isolated. And the second part is a genetic unit. Now, what does that mean? Genetic unit means they are all having the same karyotype. What does karyotype mean? Karyotype means putting all your chromosomes in line. Okay, we have 23, right? 23 pairs. So that means 46. Everybody has the same number of chromosomes. So it is called a genetic unit because all the individuals have the same karyotype or the same number of chromosomes or the DNA, how it is placed. The third one is a evolutionary unit. Now, what does evolutionary unit means? That means they have the same structural and functional characters. Take human beings, we all have the same four limbs too, and the same kind of bones in your body, right? Comes off with humerus, radio ulna, the phalanges. The bones are the same. They have the same structural and functional characters. So he termed them as evolutionary unit. And then we have an ecological unit. This is all to describe species by the scientist Buffon. An ecological unit means all of these guys occupy the same ecological niche. You can call it niche or niche, it's up to you. A same ecological niche. That means they are in the same place or and do the same job. Habitat. They have the same habit and the habitat. So it is called an ecological niche. So if we see a picture, let's see if we have it. Okay, here we go. So this is the reproductive unit. They are geographically isolated. Reproductive isolation. So it is a reproductive unit, and it is a genetic unit because it has the same karyotype. This is a human karyotype. We all have this, and this is a female because there are two X chromosomes. But so it is called a genetic unit. And the third is the evolutionary unit. Means we have the same morphology and structurally we are same with the whale and the bat. And the ecological unit is they all occupy the same ecological niche and they do the same things. That are this is just the giraffes. So they all eat the same thing, do the same things. It's an ecological unit. So remember these four units: a reproductive unit, a genetic unit, an evolutionary unit, and an ecological unit. Okay, this is proposed by Buffon, right? Remember all these four. This is a 4-mark question. So when somebody asks what species is, don't just write that. It is a basic unit of classification. Although that is right, but expand on it because different authors have and scientists have different takes on the concept of it. John Ray said that they have a Linnaeus said the unit of classification. Buffon said evolution of species paves the way for the biological evolution, and Charles Darwin proposed the origin of species through variations. We actually describe how evolution forms through species. And Buffon, according to Buffon, remember the 4 points. It's a breeding unit, a genetic unit, an evolutionary unit, and an ecological unit. Breeding unit because they are reproductively isolated and they all interbreed to produce fertile offspring. The genetic unit because they have the same karyotype, same number of chromosomes, and evolutionary unit because they have the same structural and functional characters, and ecological unit because they occupy the same niche. Okay, so that is about species. So we've learned about nomenclature, binomial nomenclature, trinomial nomenclature, and the basic unit of classification, which is species, about the different scientists take or opinion or concept on species. Now, before we end the topic of species, B is called Apis. The genus is Apis. And there are different species. So let's say Apis indica, there's Apis dorsata, there is Apis mellifera, and so these are all bees, right? But the species is different. Okay. The species is different, so they are different species of the same genera. Okay, Apis indica, Apis dorsata, and Apis mellifera. But if we take an earthworm, it is called Pheredema postoma. And if we take cockroach, a roach, this is Periplaneta americana. Now, if we take man, he is Homo sapien. This you should know by now, right? These are all different species from different genera. So you understand the difference? These, they are all bees, but these are different species belonging to the same genera. These are all different species belonging to different genera. Okay? This is different species, different genera. This is different species, same genera. Okay? All right. So there is one more caveat. There's one more thing that we need to understand, and we can close the species concept. What is it? The related species. Let's say, let's take genus. Let's take the genus Equus. Who comes in this genera? The donkeys and horses, right? They belong to the same genera. Sometimes, you know how species is reproductively isolated, right? That means they don't interbreed. But we can interbreed forcibly by related species. But what happens is they become sterile. The offerings we get are sterile. You remember, right? Mules and Indians. Mule is a jackass. That means male donkey. If we cross a male donkey with a female horse or a mare. Anyway, here we have female horse and we cross the male donkey. These are exceptions because usually species interbreed among within its own species, but we can interbreed closely related species. For example, genus Equus, if you cross a horse and a donkey, you get an offspring, but these are sterile. Okay, remember that. With that, we come to the end of the concept of species. Understood? That is the basic unit of classification. Remember the Four. It is a breeding unit, it is a genetic unit, it is a evolutionary unit, and an ecological unit. I'm not gonna go over it again, but you can go back and look at it. So with that, we complete the end of the concept of species. Now let's look at kingdom Animalia. And one other thing that I forgot to tell you is we can remember the kingdom phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, right? These are all the 7 obligate categories. And some of you have even written it down, so very good people. But remember, there is another one, domain. So you can remember that if you put a mnemonic to it, it is dear King Phillips came over for good soup. Mnemonic means the first letter of the sentence. Dear King Phillips came over for good soup. D is for domain, K is for kingdom, P is for phylum, C is for class, O for order, F for family, G for genus, and S for species. Remember that. Dear King Phillips came over for good soup. But if we take the domain off, we have 7 obligate categories. Okay, otherwise we have 8 if we add domain to it. Now, this is the classification that we have learned in our previous class, right? But from domain to kingdom, from domain to kingdom, there are subcategories. Now, what are these categories? We have to learn this, and it is important to know. Okay. So we know that there are 3 domains, right? Eukarya, archaea, and bacteria. But we are only interested in eukarya and Animalia. So kingdom Animalia. We're going to go all the way down to, well, not all the way, but phylum. According to the obligate categories or the main categories, we know that in the kingdom we have different phylum. Right, this is one of the kingdoms in eukarya. Anyway, so when it comes to obligate categories, these two are right next to each other, right? Animalia, and then comes phylum, right? There are in 4 and there are 9 in here, right? 9 phylum. Now let's see. Now kingdom Animalia has subkingdom. There are subcategories, okay? So the after kingdom comes subkingdom. Should take another, let's take another color. Subkingdom. Now kingdom Animalia has 2 subkingdoms. What are they? Let's see. One is Parazoa, the other is Eumetazoa. Now we all characterize them because of, we all do the classification based on certain characteristic features, right? So This is the first level, and the tissues haven't formed yet. So this is the organization is cellular level of organization. Because we don't see any tissues here. We have, for the first time, we have a tissue grade of organization in Humetazoa. Here, for example, you have porifera. And this is the phylum, right? You know that, right? This is the phylum. An example is fungus. So kingdom Animalia, we are gonna go from kingdom to phylum with the subcategories. Okay. So the first subcategory is the subkingdom, and it is a cellular level of organization because we haven't the tissues haven't formed yet. So there are parazoa and eumetazoa. In eumetazoa, we see the tissues. In parazoa, you do not see the tissue grade of organization. It has for the first time you see it in here. And the second one is, now this stops here, right? The first phylum, Porifera. So the next one is Eumetazoa. What do we see in Eumetazoa? Now the Eumetazoa also has two grades. One is radiata, the other one is bilateria. Now there it was the cellular level of organization. Now here is based on the symmetry. This one has more than one line of symmetry. For example, if you take, for example, Hydra, you can cut the before we name the animal. Let's take the phylum first. The phylum that are included in the radiata are Ctenophora and Cnidaria. And you see, for example, these are the phylum. Okay. And in Cnidaria, for example, you can take as Hydra. If you can cut the Hydra on different planes, there is more than one plane of symmetry here. That's radiata. And in bilateria, you can cut the organism into two halves. Bilateral symmetry. This is based on the organization. Here we're talking about how they are organized. That is how we are classifying or differentiating from kingdom all the way to phylum. So here we see bilateral symmetry. These are diploblastic animals. That means di means two. These are triploblastic. And you see diploblastic is you have